world because it's still surrounded in sin. Whatever life is dealing with to you right now, understand God has a purpose for it and a reason for it. And the issue is, where are you in looking for His will to be done? Nebuchadnezzar, let's see. And the princes and the governors and the captains and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw the men upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was the hair on their heads singed, neither were their clothes changed, nor the smell of the fire had pressed on them. How many of you have been by a campfire? I got a hunch most of us have been by some form of a campfire in our life. And when you go into the tent in the middle, if you close your night, do your clothes smell like smoke? Yeah. This is how complete the salvation was for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You couldn't even smell the smoke. Salvation that God provides is complete. I want us to think about for a moment that even no matter what we've done wrong in our life, when we find ourselves in the presence of God because of the blood of Christ, nothing can be seen of what we did. The salvation He provides is complete without failure. You can't even smell that we were close to a world of sin. His salvation is that complete. If you don't realize that, you've missed the point. It is complete and it is absolute. The next, as things go on, there's another dream. And we have in our Sunday school lesson this morning a picture of a stump floating in space. This reminded me of chapter 4. It reminds me of the next dream that Nebuchadnezzar has. And it's a dream of a giant tree that provides food for birds. It provides shelter for all the animals. And Nebuchadnezzar also views in this dream that it gets chopped down because the God of heaven said so. And he comes down and he chops it off. Okay, it's cut down. And he gets concerned about this dream just like he did the last one. And Daniel comes in and explains to him what the dream is about. God gives him the answer. And the answer is about there's one last thing that has to happen in Nebuchadnezzar's life, and he has to understand that God is in control of providing the message, which is the dream. He's in control of providing the interpreter, which is his pastor, for lack of a better term. And God is in control of what happens at the end of it. And Nebuchadnezzar can make two choices. He can choose to disbelieve in God. Or he can choose to go, oh, gee, I see you there, and I'm going to be obedient to you because you are in control. Nebuchadnezzar's the belief is that the 7 times that are talked about in chapter 4 are 7 years. He is crazy. He thinks he's an animal. He's out in the field eating like the animals do. Okay, until he realizes who God is and subjects himself to God. That happens to us sometimes too, and it doesn't mean that we have to go crazy and go out and eat grass off the ground. But at some point in time in our life, we need to realize who is in control and let him have control. Nebuchadnezzar learns the lesson and lets him have control. That's where the quote in verse, I'm going to go to verse 26 for a second. And whereas they commanded us to leave the stump and the tree roots, thy kingdom shall be sure unto thee, after thou shalt have known that the heavens do rule. Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable unto thee, and break off thy sins of thy righteousness and thine iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, if there be a lengthening of thy tranquility. That's where I got to the verse that I read, that I quoted earlier in the sermon. And that is to go to chapter 4. After all of this, he wakes up out of his slumber, if you will. And he says, But at the end of those days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, looked up into heaven, and my sanity returned to me. Then I praised the Most High, and honored and glorified him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are counted as nothing, and he does what he wants with the army of heaven and the inhabitants of earth. And there is no one who can hold back his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" I want us, as we look at these things, to remember that God is the authority. God is building something. He's building his kingdom. And his kingdom is made of people who believe in him. It's made of people who worship him. It's made of people who honor and glorify him and recognize who he is in their own individual lives. It's not enough just to recognize that he has authority over this kingdom. It's recognizing that he has authority over you. And that whatever you're going through, Romans 8:28 is a reality. All things that are meant for evil, God uses for good. Think about that. Nebuchadnezzar meant to kill somebody. And as a result of the intent to kill Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he say his life was saved. Because he learned to know who God is. And how much authority he has. We talk about who were the kingdoms of this statue. And we talk about the 70 weeks of Daniel. And we talk about all this prophecy. But what is the real issue here? The real issue here is what God's doing. And if we don't keep our eye on what God's doing, we don't know what to do in our own life. We need to learn to recognize what God's doing around us and what God is doing in us. And I can't think of anything more important to say than to God be the glory. Great things he has done, and great things he is doing, and great things are yet to come. If you don't know Christ as your Savior, well, in Luke, we're told that today, your life may be required of you. It might happen tonight. It might happen 5 minutes from now. If you don't know Christ as your Savior, today is the appointed time. Don't wait. Okay? If you do know Christ as your Savior and you haven't made that step to move forward and acknowledge him as the ruler of your life and do what God has put you here to do, then I recommend you consider that. Remembering that when you put your hands to the plow, you need to leave the rest behind. Take the plow in your hand, keep your eyes fixed on the task at hand and what you're called to do, and move forward. We want to. The point is to leave this world and what the world thinks behind, and do what God calls us to do. It is our custom here to have people that believe in the power of prayer to come forward and be prepared to greet you if you have prayers that you need, or if you have questions. If you have questions about salvation or reestablishing your life with Christ, the altar is open, and there are people who are willing to help. Doc, I understand you're in the room. Doc, are you in the room? Would you do me a favor and come up and join me, please? And Rex, would you mind joining me also? When we're done, then I'll close with a word of prayer before we close. Go ahead.